In today's video, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know before you buy a Ventus Aetos controller. All right, to start this off, I want to dive in on the #1 misconception that we see at Electrix. A lot of people call in, they want a controller for their bike, they think it's instantly going to give them more power. That can be true, but typically it's not true. A lot of people, they have a fully stock bike. That's why they're looking at a controller, because they know that's part of the equation to get more power. The problem is that a lot of batteries are capped at a certain amp discharge. Let's use this bike behind me as an example. So this is a 24-ser on Ultra B. When it's new, a stock battery in that bike, it limits you to 210 amps. So if you put a controller on the bike and you're looking to get 20 kilowatts, it's not really likely going to happen because you're limited by the battery, the BMS within it. And sure, there are ways where you could probably uncap that and have people modify it, but then you risk having a battery that's unstable, that could start fires. We don't ever advise that, right? So now you're in a position where you could get a new battery, but for this bike, it's going to be about $2,500 at minimum, or you could just get another bike. And I wanted to start by saying that because a lot of people who want more power out of their bike, they don't realize that they might have to spend an extra $2,500 to like $3,500 for a battery just to get what they want out of it. And then maybe they run into the issue of their motor overheating. So a controller, yes, it can add power. You need it to add more power to your bike. But at the end of the day, say if you're on an e-ride, you're on a 2.0 or something like that, and you're wanting more than 12 kilowatts, you could definitely go down the route of putting, say, like a 3.0 battery in it, a controller or a 3.0 controller, and do the 2.5 kind of mod. But then you're just spending a lot of money doing that too. So we kind of always advise that people, they get a bike that has the amount of power that they want, and then the controller can do things like controlling the power, rather than just aiming toward getting more power. With that disclaimer out of the way, let's talk about things that I know you're going to get out of the Aetos controller. So #1, you're going to get control. You're going to get control of your power. You're going to be able to tune it however you want. If you do have a big battery, you can obviously get more power out of it, but even just like the little nuances of your riding style, right? This bike for me is a trail bike, and I really like having different power modes. So to break them down for you, I have Power Mode 1, which is super mellow, eco mode, literally goes under 30 miles per hour. I just want to have a mode where I can go full throttle on the bike, go down the road, really kind of save range, and just have a really laid back tune in case I ever need to really conserve. Mode 2 for me is a very, very chill trail riding map. I rarely sit in it, but if I'm really kind of just like trying to take a break, conserve energy, have something that isn't really jumpy, but still has some speed, I go to Mode 2. Mode 3 is where I typically live on this bike for trail riding. It has a lot of nice torque. It's not all of the power on tap at once, but it works really well. It's enough torque to be able to pop me out of different situations if I'm getting up to a rock obstacle or something like that, but it's still mellow enough that I can go through rock beds and not have a jerky kind of throttle experience. Mode 4 is still a trail map for me, I would say, but it's more for going up hills and having quick bursts of power if I really know I need to get on the throttle quickly. I like Mode 4 for that. I don't use it super often because Mode 3 is very similar to it, but Mode 4 is accessible. And then Mode 5 for me is kind of my all-out race mode. Right now, the bike is kind of tuned down with the amp output to be more of a trail setup, but if I go to the track, I like Mode 5. I want to have all the power on tap all at once. I want it to be the right amount of hit on the bottom so I can come out of ruts quickly, and that's kind of how I lay out my maps. I'm giving you these examples because they're real-world scenarios of like why you would want to have 5 different power maps. And it's not just that. You also have Regen control. So the EBS mode on the controller allows you to dive into Regen settings. So it's kind of like engine braking is how I would translate it to a gas bike. On top of that, you also have an optional Regen lever on the left side. I don't usually use the Regen brake in my everyday, sometimes if I'm going down hills, but typically for me, it's kind of more of a backup type feature that I really like because it's possible that you'll lose your rear brake on the bike. And when you lose that, it's hard to get out of certain situations. So it's kind of nice to have that backup. Where I personally like having this set on my bike is to e-clutch, and it works like a normal clutch. Yes, it doesn't have the same amount of feel, but it allows you to transfer power to the ground gently so your wheel isn't spinning. So those are the primary reasons why you would like a controller, but there's kind of a hidden feature in the Aetos that a lot of people are gravitating toward now, and that is Wheelie Mode. So how Wheelie Mode works is that you can set the angle of your bike. So say I usually go around like 55 to 60 degrees with my bike, and it basically knows that once you hit this point, it doesn't allow you to add more throttle and loop yourself out. And this is obviously a mode where you can kind of cheat wheelies. You're just working on your side-to-side balance and your pop-up technique, but that's super important and super safe, you know? People get hurt very often doing wheelies on bikes. For example, one of our shop guys, his son recently just fractured his back. Not good. And honestly, if you had a mode like Wheelie Mode, it would prevent you from looping that bike out. It would teach you how to sit in that position. So then someday you do feel comfortable doing that. So yes, it is kind of a cheater mode. Yes, it's kind of a party trick. You can do a lot of different things with that make it a lot easier. But if you're learning how to do wheelies, it's actually a really nice safety feature. If you've already started to do research on the Aetos controller, you probably realize that there are 3 different versions of it. There's the Pro, there's the Max, and there's the Ultra. There's also a 1.7 wiring harness. Basically, the 1.7 is for the new Aetos version. If you see a 1.6 harness, that's for the previous V9600 controller version. There are only certain bikes that this controller is compatible with, and you can find that list by looking at the 1.7 harness on our website. Once you've confirmed that the Aetos controller fits your bike, you're going to want to decide between the Pro, the Max, or the Ultra. The biggest distinguishing factor between those 3 models is voltage. What is your battery? What is the system that it's going to be running on? So for the Pro controller, which I have in my bike back here, that's a 72-volt system. You can't do a battery that's bigger than that. It's for 72-volt batteries. A lot of bikes are going to come with that, not all. The downside to the controller, however, is if you plan to get a battery that's bigger than 72 volts. An example could be, say, if you got the Pegasus battery for this bike back here, or another 96-volt system, or even something in the 80s. You're going to want to have something like the Max controller. If you think you might upgrade to a battery system that's bigger than what you have, if you happen to know what that would be, say if you think, I kind of want to future-proof myself for a 96-volt system, then maybe get the Max to begin with. You can run your 72-volt battery on it, but then when you get a 96-volt battery, you're not trying to sell your controller and swap it out. The Ultra controller goes even higher at 118 volts. So if you know you're going to build a bike that goes up to that voltage range, you're going to want that. You might be wondering here though, why not just get the Ultra? Like, is there a downside to like getting that versus the other? There is. There's only so much that these controllers can take, and there has to be something that's affected somewhere else in the chain in order to make it work properly. So where you're going to see the biggest difference between the 3 models and where it starts going down in performance is as you go up in voltage, the phase current will go down. Referring to the document that's in the description on our website, you can see that the Aetos Pro, rated for 72 volts, has a phase current up to 1200. The Aetos Max, rated for 96 volts, has a phase current up to 960. So we're already going down. And finally, the Aetos Ultra is rated for 118 volts. It has a phase current of 760. If you don't own a controller already, those numbers may not mean a lot to you. So basically, phase current is kind of your bottom end hit with the controller. And I will say that the Aetos Ultra controller, based on how I have my Pro currently set, wouldn't do the same thing. It wouldn't have the same phase current. It wouldn't have the same hit off the bottom because I'm set to around like 900, 950. So the Max would work for me. And I think that if you're just trying to like future-proof yourself, you don't know, you're coming from 72 volts, you may go bigger. I think a Max is a really good like safe bet. You future-proof yourself enough. I think the Ultra is a little bit of an outlier. I don't think a lot of people are running that high of a voltage or plan to do that. There aren't a lot of options out there. So just for a rule of thumb, if you know you're going to just be on a 72-volt battery, you know you're not going to upgrade the bike beyond that. Say if you did an upgraded 72-volt battery like I did in my bike, the Pro is fine. I would just stick with the Pro. It's totally fine. That's all you really need. If you are not sure, if you want to future-proof it for yourself or maybe the next buyer who will look at that spec on the bike, get the Max. You're probably still going to get all the performance that you want out of the bike, and you're going to future-proof yourself. The Ultra, however, I would only reserve if you know you're going to be above 96 volts and up to 118. I know that was a lot of information, but it's super important. You need to know, will it actually work for what I want to do? Is it compatible with my bike? And which version of the controller do I need? So now let's take a closer look at how this functions on the bike and in the app. Let's have a closer look at this controller. So currently it's off. Turn it on. You'll see the boot up. It's a little loading screen on this new version, and everything is good. That loading is likely the battery BMS connecting. If you do not have a battery with a Bluetooth BMS like that, it's probably just going to do voltage estimation. I'll show you that in the menus here though. So before I zoom in, I just want to go over these controls. So this is where my Regen lever is right now, and here's the control pad. So you have up, down, you have a button for EBS, you have a button for mode, a start button, and a horn button, which does work on this bike. There are no Aetos controls on the right side of the bike. You could put these over there, but I would recommend keeping these on your left side. For the controls on the left side, navigating the display, currently it's selected to mode. And if I go up and down right now, you can go between modes 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And it labels those up top. They're titled Easy Go, Eco, Sport, Race, and Boost. If you select EBS over here on the controls, it will jump over to EBS, which is your regen setting, and you can increase this. I currently have it set in the app to 0. If you have it set higher, I believe it should retain that and it'll make that your minimum. But yeah, you can go 0, you can go to kind of a ridiculous level. Honestly, I find that anything over 50 is too much for me. So it's nice to have the option, and you can go as high as you want, really. Currently, you can see that the bike is in park right now. And to get it into ready mode, you basically hit the start button on the controls here. And it will say ready up top and D for drive. And now the throttle will be active on the bike. To get it back into park, you can hit start again and we'll go to park. After you've gone to ready mode and then back to park, the rear wheel will be locked up. It's literally a park mode. So if you do need to push your bike forward, you'll either need to put it into ready mode and be careful with your throttle, or turn the bike off and push it. Now let's have a closer look at the display. There is start engine stop. On this bike, that does not do anything. On the left side here, there's up, down, OK, and then if you hold OK, it backs out of the menu. So if you actually hold down OK, you can change the view of the screen. So this is kind of the more traditional look of the screen. Some people prefer this. I personally prefer this one right here. To go into the menu, you can just press OK. And you have a lot of different options in the menu system. Not everything is accessible. Some of this stuff is more suited for the V1 Plus bike. Some features you will not have, but you have access to the majority of this. So you have create timer, stats on that recorder. You can switch between metric and British. This is basically kilometers and miles per hour. Language, you can set the time. You can adjust your brightness. For outside, I usually like setting this to 100. For filming purposes, this is set lower right now. For volume, you can adjust if you have the sound during power up, and you can also adjust how loud the beeps are. Super nice to have that flexibility. So you can see below volume that there's speaker/horn and angle setting, but because it's not accessible by this bike, it'll skip right over that. There's a BLE unlock feature. There's a password unlock feature. Once again, it's skipped over the headlight feature. Bind battery, so this is an important one. If you do have a battery like this Ventus one that I have in this bike, the 72 volt, 65 amp hour battery that has a Bluetooth BMS, you can bind via Bluetooth. Super nice to have that option. Otherwise, voltage estimation is where you're going to want to be. There are updates. This is enable Bluetooth OTA. So this is what you're going to need if you're going to update the screen. I actually just updated the controller and the display on this. You're going to need to enable this in order to update the display, but it typically is not set to on. It's going to skip over a few more things here, and now we're at speed calibration. You can use this to fine-tune your speed. The easiest way to do that would basically be have your phone mounted here to your handlebars, have it set to a GPS type app that has miles per hour, and you can reference what the bike is telling you versus what your phone is telling you, go off of what the phone is saying, and adjust it to match on the bike. Below that is throttle calibration. I really like that they have this in the display on this bike. Yes, you can do it in the app. It's probably a better experience in there, but say if you needed to calibrate your throttle, you're out there in the middle of nowhere and you don't have a phone with you, this is super nice. Also, the regen lever calibration is right here. And you can also calibrate your motor right here. So you can do most all your setup from the bike display. And then it has about, so you can view your firmware version. And that is the menu. Up top here, you can see controller, motor, and battery temperatures, all available. I have mine set to Fahrenheit right now. And if we use the up and down arrows here, we can see more stats on the bike right now. So this is kind of like trip, odometer type things. Motor controller info, very nice. Battery info, cell voltage. So if you have your battery bound via Bluetooth, you're going to see an accurate readout of every single cell and their voltages, which is super crazy nice. And finally, for the wheelie mode feature, you can actually control that from your controls here as well. So no matter what you're on, either ready mode or in park, you can hold the mode button over here. It will give you some sound. And this is your degree. So you can see in the top right, now it says wheelie. Lets you know that that's functioning. And now if I hit up and down, it will change my angle. You can set this in the app, which I'm about to dive into here for you, what your parameters are. So I have it currently set to my minimum is 45, and I can go up to 65, which is probably a little bit too far. I think I had it set to about 60 or 61 the other day. But yeah, you have all of that control right there. You can turn it on and off on the bike and not have to dive into the app, and then just press mode, and you're back to the normal riding mode. And finally, let's take a look at the VTB app. So it's going to show my bike right here, FOC with my name, and we will connect. This is not always perfect. Sometimes there are issues with the app. Sometimes you have to kill it. Sometimes you have to restart the bike. Today, I'm dealing with a few bugs with it after doing the new update, but for the most part, it works really well. This is how you get your bike completely set up. By the way, this little selection up top here, that selects Wheelie Mode, and I can hear it on the bike when it's doing that. So that's another way to access that in case you need it. Let's go into parameter settings right now. And these are all my different ride modes. So let's say for sport mode, this is typically what I trail ride in right now. In this menu, you can change the name of each mode. You can adjust your speed control, which is basically field weakening, and you can set it as a percentage. Traction control, this is the phase current like I talked about earlier in the video. Coasting regen, which is basically EBS, you can set this up so it defaults to a certain level and will not go below that. Throttle curve, if you don't like it to be completely linear, you can adjust that. Regen brake, I've actually set this to be a little bit smoother off the bottom. And you can set your regen brake max current. So if you find that it's locking up a lot, you may not really want it to be that high. And whenever you do a setting, you're going to want to hit apply right here. And then also it's going to remind you need to save to the bike. So right here, there's a little bike icon. You're going to want to hit save. That is actually saved to the bike then. That's super important. All these other modes function the same way. There are additional parameters at the bottom, and this is where you can switch it over to e-clutch if that's what you'd like to do. Now let's go back to the main menu. You can see a real-time status of everything that's going on the bike. Some people like doing a screen recording of this while they're riding just to get data on the bike and be able to review it after the fact. You have user manuals built into the app, which is super nice to have that support video and a user manual. And down here is the firmware upgrade option. So this is currently up to date, but this is where you would go to find that. And then finally, if we go back into parameter settings and then go to advanced setting down here, this is where you do your initial setup with the bike. This is the really important stuff, right? So this is where you're going to select what the bike is, what kind of battery you have in it, what kind of motor is in it, and then you'll do different calibration for, say, the throttle or the regen lever or the motor, and you're going to want to make sure all that is very accurate. You also are able to rename the device right here. That's how I have my name set in it. You can set a password in case you want to have the bike locked, so you can actually access it. I choose to not have that. I don't need it for my use case. Default mode for startup, so mode 3, this is how I do that. I always like to start in my default trail mode, so if I turn the bike on and I get going again, I can set it here. Say if I was doing a track day, maybe I would just like set this for mode 5 for the day. Reverse gear settings, park settings, and all of your sensors. So say if you had brake sensors connected, or wanted your stand sensor, or wanted a tilt sensor, you could adjust all that here. That's going to do it for this video. If you have any other questions about the Aetos controllers, about their compatibility, or have just questions about building your bike out and getting the power that you want out of it, give us a call, shoot us an email, or visit us at electrixmotoco.com.